and you've had a reputation actually as being a particular specialist or a particular expert at exit strategies. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the 1031 exchange. Everybody doesn't like to pay taxes, right? Nobody likes to pay taxes. I don't care where you are on the political spectrum. Nobody wants to pay taxes, right? So, can you tell our viewers a little bit about what a 1031 exchange is and how it factors into medical office investing?
Yes. So if you're selling a property, so I help a lot of physicians maximize the value of their physician-owned property. So when they come to me and they want to sell, I help them understand, that they need to put a long-term lease in place, and then they can sell to these investors that typically are 1031 buyers. 1031 buyers, they are, as they're looking for investment properties to buy after they sell in order to take advantage of the 1031 tax deferral opportunity. So you have to be a little bit cautious, because if they've identified too many and put yours under contract, and then they'll select yours. But I luckily haven't had that happen. They are looking for quality tenants. They are looking, the first thing they want to see is the lease and your financials. So I've struggled with some physicians not wanting to release their practice financials. If they're a strong enough practice, they don't have to release their personals. It just depends on the buyer and the practice. But I immediately now, I don't even go to market without having practice financials. So, they want to see those two things first. That is, these investors are buying the cash flow. They're buying the cash flow. They are underwriting it based on their opinion of the financial strength of the tenant. So that's on the buyer side. Now, if you're for these physicians, or investors, whichever, if they're selling this and they want to do a 1031 exchange, they can go into other investment properties. Some have wanted to, start going into the short-term rental market. They, sometimes they actually sell this and buy another property or two to put their practice in, or they're going to buy another practice and then they're going to put that in, so that there's a variety of ways that you can use it if you're selling a property and you don't want to take the tax hit on those proceeds. But it has to go into an investment property of some sort. But that's, what I tell physicians and or an investor, the maximum value of your property is when either for an investor, when the WALT is the highest, or for a physician-owned building, when you are the tenant in there and you put a long-term lease on it. So if you can maximize the value with those opportunities, then you can take the proceeds and go and do other investment opportunities with them.
Definitely a great method for looking at potentially exiting and kind of deferring tax. But there are risks that come about, right? So I was wondering if you could kind of look, there's never free lunch, right? So
right.
What are some of the risks and drawbacks that you've seen, or at least you've seen from other agents and brokers in the market when selling a medical office property?
What are the risks and drawbacks
of at least the 1031 exchange process? Because I think, look, no one wants to pay taxes.
Right. So obviously identifying a property. So if you're thinking of doing a 1031 and selling a property, I would have in mind some properties that you're already looking at, because but the timing is everything, because the sales cycle might be longer than you expected. They might need an extra 30 days to close for whatever reason. There might need to be something fixed in due diligence, which extends the sales cycle. So, you have to, I would say, have a variety of properties that are potential for you to be able to strike on once that timeline, is known. So the 1031 exchange is a little bit time sensitive. So there's the reverse 1031 exchange, which, I think is a great opportunity if you want to try to mitigate your risk. But again, there's always risk in selling. So if you buy a property, and do the reverse exchange, but your property doesn't sell in the time frame, there's always a risk. So that's just, if that's for somebody that makes sense for. I would say, put the property on the market, get a sense of the activity. If it looks like it's going to go fast, have some properties that you can move on fast, but then, have different buckets of properties that you can move on immediately, properties that you can move on in a couple of months, and then properties that might take a little bit of time, so that you have a little bit different variety of things that you can go into and, try to mitigate that time. But the 1031, it's a time sensitive strategy for sure.
And you talk about it as a time sensitive strategy. What are kind of some of those time limits that folks are worried about? Because I think there are a lot of investors that we talk to that'll be like, oh, I want a 1031. And then you're like, well, I just don't think it's going to be plausible within your time frame. So what kind of is that time limit that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, you have 45 days to identify, the property. And then, from there, I think the timing starts to change with what you need. But the 45-day to identify new properties is the big one. So you have to, have some properties that you can invest in 45 days and realistically close on, pretty soon thereafter. So so that is the time frame. And it's when you're looking at investment properties and you're working with physicians, 45 days is not a lot, to look for properties, see if they're viable, negotiate with, either through another broker or direct with the owner, which they have lives of their own. So, when you do a 1031, if that's something you're looking to do with the proceeds, I recommend that you start that as a parallel path with the sales process and be able to time it appropriately.
A change of pace from the get-rich-quick gurus. Subscribe to the Real Finds podcast for in-depth conversations with voices shaping the real estate world.